All right, top of the hour. Let's stay timely and kick this off. Welcome everybody. This would be episode number 29 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. Every week we're here to share information with you on Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And if this is your first time joining, which I think there may be a couple new names with us here today, you can catch all the previous episodes that Dan has uploaded to the YouTube channel. You can find that at Baseline Web Training, and that's all one word on YouTube, Baseline Web Training, as well as some of the other how-to videos that Dan has produced, such as how to create a Base Manager account, how to add users to Base Manager, and quick tips like that. So check those out on YouTube. And just quick introductions. I'm Andy Humphrey. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for the Northeast, and we have Dan Conger, our Training Manager, as usual. And then special guest today, Tracy Shields out of Colorado, who's Regional Sales Manager for the Midwest and some of the Pacific Northwest. And topic for today, Dan, we're going to hit messages and alerts, right?
Right on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's just hand it over to you.
Perfect. Right. So Base Manager and controller alerts they're really great at helping you pinpoint the problem or something that you need to adjust on your system. We're going to go over some of those messages, but we're also going to go over how to set it up. So be able to, having a message sitting on your controller is wonderful, but really we want to get those, out to our phone and out of the controller, out of the field. So having that, making sure there's a communication method and making sure that path and all the information's in Base Manager is really important. So we're going to start with that first. So I'm going to jump into Base Manager. So I'm going to share my screen and go over to Base Manager.
And while you're doing that, what we find too is that oftentimes someone will get to step one with Base Manager. They'll get their controller connected, and then they'll use the front user interface to operate the controller, set programming, and then they a lot of times forget to go back into these admin settings and sign themselves up for alerts and messages and or other individuals either at their company or contract company to get these alerts. And so I'm glad we're showing this because it's an often overlooked or just forgotten about setting.
So the place where we're going to be working on is not on maps or quick view or schedules. It's in the menu, or our engineers like to call this a hamburger. So click on that menu and we're going to go to administration and then administration one more time. And that opens up a new window. And this shows all the different controllers. Now, since this is my training controller deck, there's a lot of controllers that I use when I do in-person training, but really I'm going to work on this my user information. So this is just for me. So I'm going to open up my user information. And really what's important is having the good communication path here. So this is the content that I've already set up. So I've got my password set up. Here's my level of permissions that I have, but my email. So right here, here's my email. That's in here. So that's how I'm going to get my information. I've also got my phone number right here. And if I'm going to allow text or email, this is the text number. And I was thinking how funny this is that this is actually separate, because this is back in the day when we had pagers, where text numbers were separate from your phone number. Now it's all one and the same. The cell providers needs to be clicked on from that drop-down menu. And then, so most people get this right, but what sometimes people miss is this disable all alerts right here. If this is clicked, I could set everything up and I'm not going to get a single alert sent to my phone or to my email. So I need to allow all the alerts below, assuming I want to get alerts. Now, my training controller has lots of problems in it, and it's purposely set up that way. Well, I don't necessarily want to get those alerts, so I might disable those alerts. But if you select your time zone, now we can fine tune how you get your alerts, right? So I'm in the Pacific on the West Coast, so I'm going to select Pacific. And if I'm going to get reports or organized reports, I want to get them. I can pick a particular time. So I want to get it at the beginning of my day. You start earlier, well, then maybe you want to set it for a 5 a.m. My emails, I only want to get once a day, but then my text messages, I have the ability to fine tune when they come in. So I am not going to allow texts between midnight and 6 a.m., but I'll allow them essentially from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So during general working hours, I'll allow them. But if I'm the on-call guy and there's main lines, well, maybe I need to allow them for a particular times. But you can opt in and opt out at certain times. So that's the other one that's important.
Yep. And then think about these time slots, everyone who's listening, as it relates to the messages that we're going to review today. So if any of the messages that we review sound interesting and valuable, you may want to receive some of these, perhaps either in the middle of the night or after work. If they are emergency type messages, you may decide you do want them at off work hours.
So I think what's kind of nice about this is if you're an admin, if I'm a manager and I have 3 techs working on me, I might want my messages only during working hours. But my techs that are out in the field, I'm going to make sure they're opted in for 24 hours. Or what if you're in a union situation and someone gets an email message at 2:00 in the morning, they're on the call. Now they're paid for 2 hours of work. That might be an issue for you. So you again, fine tune it for what works for you. And once I'm done, I'm going to click this edit save, and that will save that content for me. Okay. So that's how they can get a hold of me and when they can get a hold of me. Now I need to say which subscriptions or which alerts I want to get. So alerts and report subscriptions. I'm going to click on that and then edit alert subscriptions. So we're going to
so step 1 was confirming your contact information and confirming if you want them and when you want them. Step 2 is where we're at right now, is choosing which controllers and which level of alerts.
Right. So I mentioned I have lots of controllers in here. This first one, this clock 71 and 72, is my demo controller I have 10 feet away from me. So I can turn on all of them on. So I'm going to get a message, a high priority, a medium priority, and a low priority. I can do that, or I can turn them all off. But let's turn them all on. Now, if I find that the low priority alerts are clogging up my inbox or clogging up my phone, I can opt out of certain ones. Now, Andy made a good point yesterday. Was you just suggest start with all of them, right?
Yeah, if you're new, and this may be a good time. We say high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And I would say these are generalized buckets. So there may actually be an alert that you find is a high priority. However, we've labeled it as a low priority just to get it into a bucket. And so I would suggest just starting with all of them. And then it would be better to be overwhelmed with messages and then start to filter them out than to wish you had received one.
Right. Because if you accidentally miss that mainline break, that could be bad news. Yeah. So then I could do that for each of my controllers. I could decide, if I manage just this site, I only want alerts for this controller, but maybe not that one. So once we're done, I'm going to scroll down. Did anyone notice this user, James Bond?
Hey, we've got some famous people using Baseline out there.
So then when I'm done, I'm going to save this, right? Now that I've done that, I'm all good. I'm good on what I'm going to, the information I'm going to get out of there, and they know how to get a hold of me. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now I'd like to, don't want to forget, you also need to make sure that your settings are right within your controller. So what's your flow limits? What's your pressure limits? What's your moisture limits, right? You got to have those set accurately within the controller. It's a whole nother thing, generally done through Base Manager or at the controller. Mm-hmm. Tracy, do you find on new installations that takes a little while to get those flow limits or pressure limits dialed in just quite right?
Yeah. So there's some alarm settings with a shutdown versus just detecting a variance that I'll use a lot in setting up flow with clients and seeing slow closing valves and such operate, because we operate in such real-time flow that we can see that. And we may get a spike of a high flow that might give us a false reading. Right.
And I think sometimes people might have an idea on what the flow limit should be and then find out that wasn't quite right. So I could see some time on this. Okay, so except, see, I do this to myself every so often. I think I'm all set up, and then, oh, this
It's okay. You're only turning a little red. You're doing all right.
Except this is exactly where I want to be. So, I think I'm going to be like, I got this all dialed in. I'm so slick, and then I do it wrong. But okay.
And if you're on here right now, you're going to want to stay to the end because we're going to drop a really good nugget that you can download and print in the chat. So I'm going to wait till the end to pop it in there.
Okay. So these are messages I'm pretty sure these are messages truncated from the controller versus base manager, but the description are just the same. So this first one is device 2-wire no response. It's giving you a flow bycoder number. So it's referring to a flow bycoder, and it's a high priority. So Andy, Tracy, what description can you tell me about this?
Well, this is when we wish that everybody that's with us could raise their hand because they're all jumping. Oh, I got it. I know it. I got this one. I know this one. We would hope that any experienced baseline user would know this message because it's probably one of the more common and has sort of a very specific way to troubleshoot it. Okay. So, and Dan is correct by saying this says a flow bycoder. This message could be related to any 2-wire device. So I'm just going to repeat the message. It says device 2-wire no response. And this is also a good time to just sort of remind everyone how baseline 2-wire technology works. We send a command out to the decoder, and then the command comes back to the controller.
Right.
And so this message is essentially saying, I've sent a command out there to the flow bycoder, but I didn't get a response. So the command went out, but it didn't come back. And so what that tells us is that this particular device, 99% of the time, is no longer connected to the 2-wire path. We sent the message out, but it had no response. Right. So this could be one-off, just the flow bycoder. Another thing to consider, which we often see, are groups of these messages where maybe you have 10 of them. There's 10 no response because the wire was cut. So anything downstream of that was not able to get a response back. So
here's the full description of what that is. The 2-wire communication failure, unable to talk to this device. So exactly what you're saying, it couldn't communicate with this device. And I like that idea. If you saw a grouping of these, it's just not a one-off. So if it's a grouping of these, what are the odds that 10 devices are bad?
Right. It's very rare, or even a lightning strike, because oftentimes the lightning event doesn't result in this type of a failure. It would result in a short oftentimes.
Nice. Okay.
And just to sort of add full clarity, sometimes we see this message. So again, it's telling us that the signal went out, but it didn't come back. So we also see this occasionally when a system is either out of 2-wire specification. So they've run a wire way too far. Okay. And then we can send the signal out there. And in those instances, oftentimes the valves still work. The sprinklers still come on because the device is receiving the command, but it's weak enough where it can't make it all the way back. So it could be out of spec, or there could be one or a series of poor splices where we've lost that communication. Right.
Nice. Okay. Let's see. The next one up is device valve decoder short circuit, medium priority, and it's telling us the master valve and a serial number for a bycoder. Tracy, what's your guess?
That we've got a short circuit on the 2-wire side of the valve.
On the 2-wire side. Okay, let's see.
I don't know, Tracy. I don't know.
Okay, we're going to read the full description. Let's see. Valve failure, short circuit solenoid, unable to operate this valve. So, okay, so here's my prop that I have for this one. So we've got a bycoder and a solenoid attached to it. We're talking about this side of the bycoder, the solenoid side. So somewhere there's a short on it, and it could be actually in the solenoid itself. It could be that someone did a poor splice, but it's not a 2-wire side. This is a solenoid side. So solenoid failure, solenoid wires touching, they're bare, probably a splice issue, right? Mm-hmm. So that's
yep.
what.
And you knew this one, Tracy. You're just playing along for fun. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Because, and I think this may, well, I don't want to spoil another message, but if this had been a 2-wire short, what happens in a 2-wire short? Right? The whole system goes down.
Right. That's overcurrent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So related to this one is a device valve decoder open circuit. Okay. You can redeem yourself, Tracy. What tell us about this one?
This one is going to be on the solenoid side, Dan.
Oh, okay. Good. Okay. Nice. And what's an open circuit?
An open circuit means we haven't completed circuit, an incomplete circuit. So we could have a wire that's been cut on the solenoid side, one of the 2-wire legs potentially, but we've got an open in that wire path.
Right. So here's the description: is open circuit solenoid, unable to operate this valve, and the bicoder number. So as an irrigation tech, before I worked with Baseline, I found this is way more common to have an open circuit solenoid than a short, because the splice has failed, the solenoid is actually broken, the wires are no longer touching. For a short circuit, we need to be short circuiting and closing a lot more. So this is way more common. So it could be, in this case now, the wire is disconnected, right? So that's exactly what this is. So now this is giving us a bicoder serial number right here, right? So this is saying this is a 2-wire system. But what would happen if that serial number was a VA or a VB? What would that tell you about the system?
Yep, VA or VB would be valve, for like retrofit valve.
Conventional wire, right?
Conventional wire, right?
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question, as a trainer, I always ask leading questions. Is it on a conventional wire system this is only referring to solenoid side problems? The same with the first one. Well, on a conventional wire system, we've got 2,000 feet of wire of common and this that we're measuring out to the solenoid. So that problem, that open circuit peak, could be on the solenoid itself, could be on a splice, and it could be anywhere on this wire path coming back to the controller. So if it's essentially reached the limit, the threshold for resistance, whatever that limit is, it's reached it, and it said somewhere along this wire path out to the solenoid, there's an open circuit. Mm-hmm. Where is it? Don't know. Because the other one I've thrown in my tutorial videos is you have a conventional wire terminal without a wire on it, and it checks it. There's no complete circuit. It's going to throw an open circuit on that one.
Yep. Yeah, and this would be a good time to mention that there is a time and date stamp on here. Okay, so let's say there was a tech out there or somebody was doing some service work. I'm just saying theoretically. Now there's an open circuit message. We can look and we can say, hey, who was out there, working on this decoder at 9:30 a.m.? Maybe no
Nice.
one, or maybe someone, right?
Yeah.
And then I would suggest, before deleting messages, if you're not sure what the message means, just snap a picture of it with your phone. It's very helpful if you're calling support or you're calling one of us. You may ask us something like, I had this message on the controller about zone 54. And we'll say, okay, well, what did the message say? Well, I'm not sure. It just said there was a problem, right? And there's 3 or 4 very specific messages. They could all be for the very same zone. And if we know what the message is, like this, we can tell you exactly how to fix it. But we need to know, like, word for word, literally what the message said, word for word.
I like the word for word portion of it. Yeah. Controller rain stop jumper. So it's giving us a controller serial number, time and date, and a low priority. What do you guys think?
Let's see. Well, keyword here, rain stop jumper. It's pretty much only one of those on a controller. So
right.
It's got to be a message about the where the rain sensor plugs in.
Right. So I went too far. So it says the rain contacts were triggered, all watering is stopped, and because the switch is in the open position and it's going to remain, all watering is going to remain stopped until the switch closes. So if basically it's saying your rain switch operated, that's I could see that that's not particularly urgent. It's nice to know. But
right. And we could say, I mean, basically it's saying, hey, there's a rain event.
Mm-hmm. But I don't have a rain switch. Why don't I have this message?
That's a good reason to call support right there.
Could be the
which we do see.
The jumper. Yeah. Yes. People never pull that jumper wire off, do they? And they never loosen that screw. Right. So if someone removed that jumper wire or loosened the screw and it was intermittently, you would get this message without a rain switch. And all of your watering is going to stop. So why did my controller not water last night? This might be a reason.
Yeah. And keep in mind, there are 3 terminals on the controller, the rain switch, another one that says pause, and another one that says flow, which they all act and behave the same. They're open, normally closed switches, just like the rain. And we see a lot of times the other 2 will get removed, so the one that says flow or the one that says pause. And so those are common questions. Why does my controller say flow switch? And that would be just like this, but it's the jumper and the flow terminal was taken out or became loose.
Awesome. High flow variance, mainline high flow variance detected, low priority. Okay. Tracy, you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, so we've got a difference in the amount of flow that was detected versus the amount of flow that was set as a limit.
Ooh, he's after the limit thing. Okay, cool. So
yeah, and we use keyword there, variance. So in the controller settings, if you remember, we set what we call a variance in there of whatever you want to enter, 5%, 10%, 15%, etc. Right.
So in this case, what was the value? What was the limit that we had, Tracy?
The high flow is set at 30 in this case, and he hit 37 and detected a variance between what we had set as the high flow and what was actually read.
So this detected it, and I think that last word was important. And I wanted to juxtapose this to a mainline high flow variance shutdown, which is a high priority, which is kind of unique, kind of an interesting idea. First one, exact same limits, exact same detection. But in this case, in Base Manager or in the controller, you said, when you detect this, shut down. So there's that check mark. So the first one was, hey, by the way, you had a high flow. Do you care about it? You said you didn't. Well, maybe you do. In this case, you said, I care about it and shut down the main line. So that's exactly what happened.
And that would be a good example of subscribing to all alerts, because like you just mentioned, the first one, it detected it, but it was a low priority. And this message, not only did it detected it, but it took some action on it. And that's a high priority. But you may consider detecting it in your own opinion as a user, a high priority. So if you're not sure, just subscribe to all of them.
Right. Now, Tracy, you talked about using this detection versus shutdown on initializing systems, right?
Yeah, so I'll use these particular settings in the process of learning flow with a customer on a site. So I'll leave the shutdown box unchecked, and we'll watch flows and watch the variances over the period of a week or two. Because we're seeing flow in such real time and not math-based, we will actually be able to see if we've got some slow closing valves that are overlapping other valves that are turning on, and see where our high flow really sits so that we don't get nuisance alarms in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So Andy, you need to keep me on time, because I can't see the Q&A, how those are filling up. But
yeah, we got a couple, but we've got 5 more minutes or so. Okay. How many messages do you have left?
I'll keep going till you tell me to stop. So, and then this is almost identical. This is a POC, or point of connection low pressure shutdown. So a high priority, we've got the limit and the value. This is almost identical to the previous one. No, but you'll get these messages for all these different settings.
Right. And on those, if you can just go back one, it's important to remember, and this confuses some people, limit versus value, right? So value is what it's actually reading, right now. And we use these terms for flow, for pressure, and for moisture. The limit is the set point.
Right. Nice. Yeah. In this case, the pressure was set at 35 PSI and it was only at 31.7. So it was this is a low pressure. Okay. Program priority preempted. Okay, Andy, this is priority one. Program one was preempted. What can you do? What can you tell us about that?
Let's see. I may need to see the rest of the message, but this is a program specific message, preempted. What I know is that it likely occurred when, let's say, program one was running and then another program started at the same time.
Okay.
They conflicted. So
a higher priority program has preempted this program. So either starting at the same time or started maybe a little later on, and it just because we talked about program priorities before, it bumped somebody out of the way and said, you're priority 5, I'm priority 2, I'm taking precedence over you. And that's why I preempted you. And it said the program was paused. So it didn't stop it. It stopped it temporarily, but it will resume as soon as the preemptive program,
and as a reminder, those high priority programs have to run to completion. So as soon as this high priority program is done, then it will go right back to the program that was currently running at the time. So we do have a great question that Dave asked that I missed at the beginning, and it relates to the screen, Dan, when you were setting the user time when they get the alerts. There's like those 4 time periods broken up into 6-hour chunks, right, to get to 24 hours. And Dave was asking, why set a time to get messages if they can come at any time? And so I think it's important to sort of clarify that that's not picking a time, but it's more like blocking out a window of time, right? So it's kind of like, don't send me alerts during these hours of the day, but you can send me alerts these other hours. And I believe what happens is that the messages will stack up so that if you're allowed to get them at 6 a.m., then they'll all come flying into you.
Exactly. Right. So so if you only allowed them for a certain period of time, you're going to get all of your alerts as soon as it's a little bit like turning on your phone, right? Because I leave my phone on 24/7 and a lot of us do. And this stops those work related ones. Maybe it's a work-life balance.
Right. Oops. And I'm going to put down here in the chat to everyone a link where you can download a PDF of all the base station 3200 messages. And you can keep this as your own sort of quick guide to messages. I think Dan had a good analogy that we were talking about yesterday. I don't know if you want to share that, Dan, about your car and alarm codes.
Yeah. So there's the cars now have an OBD reader, right? You plug it in and you can read the codes on there, and it'll say a P2401. Okay, well that's a code, and it might give me a vague description. Now, if I had the more expensive reader, it'll give me a paragraph. What I just do is then I'll Google that and P2401 is an emission control, and it could be these 3 or 4 things. Then I'm going to only target those 4 things, and I don't have those, so it's only these 2. So that's I think it's a good analogy of what we're giving you more descriptions, but sometimes you're going to have to either Google it or talk to support to get a little bit more information on where that is. But whole idea is to narrow down your focus of what you're working on.
Yeah. And these messages, like we sort of mentioned before, really help us remotely help you. So there's a lot that we can do remotely, either, us, Tracy, you, Dan, me, or support to troubleshoot systems when we know what the message was. Super helpful. So grab a picture of it with your phone. And again, I put it in the chat. This is like unpublished. So it's not that it's confidential. It's just we haven't done a good job of publicizing what these messages are. Dan and I looked, they're not in the user manual. And so we were able to get a hold of them, put them into this PDF document. Hope you find it valuable. And again, this is like, thanks for joining us on Tech Talk, some information that we're sharing with you that we haven't yet put on the website. So enjoy that, save it, bookmark it, download it. And what do we have next week, Dan?
Next week, we're going to be talking about substation. So, and how does some how-to, and then how it might fit into some of your needs. So talk about substation. Yeah.
All right.
It's really an extension of the 3200. Hey, one last thing before we wrap up on maybe everybody didn't get a chance to get that URL, or you're going to think about it like just as we close up. I will put that in the YouTube recording. So if you go to Baseline Web Training, all one word, that will be in the show notes, and you can grab the link there. It'll be there in perpetuity.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I think that's gonna wrap it up, and I hope everybody has a fun week, a safe week, and continues to use Baseline technology to solve site problems. See if you can find some big, complicated sites to get us on.
Right.
So appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Cheers.
Bye-bye.